This is the most often requested video that I've ever received, so I am making it for you today. The brand new series, guys, I am going to show you exactly how to deploy, regardless of what your army is, on every single Games Workshop map, and then we'll expand into the WTC maps in the future. If you follow this deployment advice, I promise you're going to skyrocket your results because the game is basically dictated by the movement phase, and your movement phase is dictated by your deployment. So most people really struggle with deployment, so I am going to go through this series where I'm going to be doing 2 maps in a video. So it's going to take me 4 videos to get through all the GW maps. And then WTC, I'll figure out how I want to structure that when we get to it. So I'm going to talk about these maps, where we have to deploy, and as we're going through it, you're going to learn how to analyze the maps as well. So today, we're going to go through GW1 and GW2. I'm not going to go through it on absolutely every single deployment because these maps are not played on every single deployment. So I'm just going to go through it on the deployments that they are actually played on. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with GW1. Now, since I'm doing this, what I figured is I would do the best job possible for you. So I took a very neutral army. I just took an Ultramarines style army. Okay, no transports in this particular list, but it does get you some interesting things. All right, so I'm just going to give you a rundown of what we have available to us here. You've got Company Heroes led by Marnius Calgar. You have Judicior, who is going to be leading Blade Guard Vets. We've got Mr. Robute Guilliman himself, a 3-man interceptor with bolters. We've got 1 squad of JPI, 1 squad of normal intercessors for some delicious sticky action. Reavers, 2 squad scouts, Combi Lieutenant, a Reaper, and double Vindicator. This is a very reasonably strong list, and it's very flexible. So there's going to be some melee in there. There's going to be some faster melee in there. There's going to be some 6-inch deep striking. We've got some great shooting platforms, and we've got some beat sticks and lots of infiltrators. So this is just a very balanced list. It's not particularly melee favored or particularly shooting favored. So I'm going to use this to teach you guys exactly how to deploy on these maps. So now when we're going to deploy on GW1, the first thing that we have to look at is where is the obvious staging point? And I really want to define for you what the staging point is. A staging point is where you can deploy safe from the enemy shooting while still being in a position to extend your influence on the map. And you're going to do this for every single map that you're ever going to look at. You're going to get sick of hearing me say that, but it is very profoundly important for when you're trying to figure out how to deploy. So on this map, we're going to start, before we do any deployments, of looking at where do we stage. So obviously right in the V, this is the staging point. Now I'm going to put this little marker here to denote the staging point. The reason why I'm going to say the staging area here is because it really depends on the terrain at the GT or the tournament you're playing at. If you're using this FLG terrain, which I kind of think sucks, I don't know if this is FLG. I shouldn't have said that. Whatever this style terrain is, I think it sucks. Because you can't really stick anything in there without it being just easily seen. So this sucks, but you know, if you have this, well, then you're probably staging here. If you've got better terrain, like you'll see on some of the other maps we do, then you will be able to stage in the ruin. So it's just depending of the terrain that your tournament is using that'll tell us. So that's why I'm going to call this a staging zone. So if I'm standing here, if this is better terrain, I can stand here. If this is crappier terrain, like what I have denoted here, I'm going to have to stand here. But I'm safe from shooting, and I'm definitely close enough to all the objectives where I can still extend my influence upon the map. This would be another example of a staging point on this map, because from here I could extend my influence to this objective very easily without exposing myself to shooting and firepower. Now, a lot of people might tell me that this is a staging point, but this is not a staging point. This would be a deployment point. The reason for that is that I can't really extend my influence on the map here particularly well. There is a slight exception. This could be considered a staging point for shooting. So like if I have a Lancer or a Reaper or whatever, just pretend this is a Lancer, this could be a very decent staging point for shooting. Because here I can't be seen, but I can very easily extend my influence across the entire map. So while this might not be a staging point for melee, this could be a staging point for shooting. So that is what we're defining as our staging points. So whenever you open up a map, you're going to start by looking at what are the staging points. That's going to dictate how we are going to deploy. Now, the next thing I do is I always look at where my big, bulky units can actually deploy. So if I am going to have, say, a Ball Predator, which is a bit of a chunky boy, I need to know, can it actually move across the sides of the map? So on this particular map, yes, I can move my Bell Predator up the map, but as we'll see in some of the other maps, which we'll be doing, not in this video, but in the next ones, I won't actually be able to move a chunky boy like this. If this was a Land Raider Redeemer, for example, I don't think I could actually move it up. Let me see if I have Land Raider saved so I can show you. If not, then I'll just get it for the next video, and it'll be okay. Yeah, I actually have a Land Raider saved right here. TTS might actually, I hate it when TTS makes me download files. Just bear with me for 2 seconds, it'll pop in. So we identify all of our staging points, and then we're gonna analyze the map. Where can we actually move our models? Can a Land Raider Redeemer actually move through here? Let's zoom in to see. No, it actually cannot move through here, so you know it can't deploy here, which means you're really gonna be left with only a very few options of where you can deploy. It can't move through here, which means it's gonna have to deploy here. It's really the only option, deploying here or deploying here. And this is a bad choice because you can be seen. All right, anyway. So I always like to check where my models can actually move. If I can't move through the corners or through the areas where I want to, then I know they'll have to go in the center. Otherwise, they're going to have to go in reserves. All right. So we have our staging points identified. Now we're going to need to figure out where are our units actually moving. So Blade Guard veterans, they are our big melee threat in this unit, in this army, especially since they're going to be led by Judas here, who has that fights first enhancement. That means that they're going to want to go to the center because they are my brawlers. When they're standing right here, they effectively cannot be interacted with. You can't really charge them, and you're very easily to actually like hero into the center depending on what's getting charged. So this is a great place for your Blade Guard vest. They can't be shot, and you basically can't charge them because they're going to mulch you with all of their damage when they fight first if you do charge them. Now, obviously, there are some units in the game that can charge them, but those are pretty few and far in between. So we know we want our Blade Guard vets to go here, which means where do I deploy them? Well, I'm going to have to deploy them here. And I know this before the game even starts. They're just going to have to deploy here. Right in the little craps. Now, just because of the low quality terrain that is on this map, I got to be really careful about how I deploy. Because if you see where I draw this line, I actually could be seen with some of my models here. So I might actually have to deploy them a little bit more in. Typically, we play that any ruin here is sticking up. If your terrain tournament doesn't play it, you might even have to deploy them here, which would also suck. But for here, we're just going to pretend that this actually does block line of sight, which means that this is a safe place for them to deploy, which means that they will be able to advance up here. Now, if you have a better terrain layout, or like better terrain that isn't all broken and cracky, you might even be able to deploy them all the way up here, depending on how much of this is blocked. Obviously, it's not blocked here, so that would be a little bit too difficult. So we know they're going to deploy here, and they're going to immediately advance into this little V. The other option would be perhaps I could deploy them here to advance up the V as well, or into the V as well. So those are the two places where you can deploy your Blade Guard veterans. Now, then I've got Cornelius Calgar with the company champions. He's going to go in the other place, right? Or he's going to end up staying right here. Because when he's staying right here, he is absolutely threatening this particular objective. And you need something that can threaten this objective. This is on Hammer and Anvil, obviously. It'll change ever so slightly if we're doing on tipping point. So this would be a great place for Marnius Calgar to deploy here. The other place where you could deploy him would be to deploy him here or here. And I know he's not an infiltrator, so I'm just going to pull them ever so slightly back so that they can't be seen through the terrain to begin with. Something like this. Now, I want my Gladiator Reaper to be flexible so that it can go out and shoot infantry basically wherever. So this is a reasonably good place for it. It can also deploy somewhere in the middle here as well. My Vindicators, also, while being slightly very flexible, want to deploy right here so that they can immediately extend their influence on the center objective, this objective, or just provide general nice anti-tank shooting if they have a big shooting tank over here. When I look at the map, I can see that there is a interesting little pocket, and I'm just going to draw my lines for you. So if my opponents want to see, this is as far as they can see from their deployment zone. If they're deployed there, if they're deployed here, they can draw this line. So basically what we want to do is we want to make sure that our opponents have to at least move out if they're going to shoot us. So my Vindicator is moved behind this red line. My opponent cannot see me. Now, of course, if they have a battle tank, they're going to move on average roughly 10 inches. So they could move roughly to here, and they could draw this line. Which means if I want to hide from that line, I'm going to have to be behind the thinner red line. There we go. So now it's impossible to shoot me turn one from that angle. And shooting me from this angle becomes very challenging, because even if they get to here, they're not really going to be able to draw this very well. So they're going to actually have to get all the way past this corner if they want to be able to shoot my Vindicator. And generally speaking, that's going to be very hard for everyone to do because your average battle tank moves 10 inches. So if they move up here, that's going to be a very, very fast and unique scenario. Okay, good. Now, where else would everything go? Robute Gulliman is one of those lucky guys that has a load op, so you can basically deploy him more or less wherever you want, so long as he is close enough to infantry. One of the cool things about Robute Gulliman is that you could advance him up to hold this objective, which is typically a very hard objective to hold because you can see this very easily, and you just string him out to within 3 inches of any infantry. Let's just say we got Marnius here or something. We just want to make sure that he is within 3 inches of Gulliman. There we go. So now they're within 3 inches of each other, and Gulliman is now lone up and can't be shot, which is a very, 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 very cool thing. You could make this even better by using our little lieutenant with combi weapon, who could also just be hanging out here, and then Gulliman can stand all the way over here, making it very challenging for anyone to ever shoot him. And now you basically got this objective unlocked. So we know that I might want to move Robute Gulliman up there turn 1, so perhaps I will just start him like that. Interestingly enough, on the other side of the map, I might want to start my lieutenant with combi weapon right here to do basically the same thing. Now I can very easily turn 1 hold this objective without exposing myself to much firepower. They would have to get 12 inches of movement from here to this direction, and if they did that, they would be exposing themselves to my battle tanks. So this is not a bad place for a lieutenant with combi weapon to perhaps be sitting turn 1. Just moving him up so they can easily walk to the objective, get me cleanse, etc. Good. Then I'm going to go, we have scouts. I've got 2 squads of scouts in this particular army. So the way I like to look at scouts is I like to control the battlefield. So if I just deploy my scouts right in the corner here, I know that I get a 6-inch pre-game move, which basically allows me the ability to move them, to start them right here as long as I'm outside of 9 of their deployment zone, which, yeah, close enough. So if I go first, the scouts can go up here and they can like move, block, do whatever they want. If I go second, I can just move them back into this sweet little pocket where they cannot be shot or charged. And I know it's just the physics of this just makes it a little difficult, so just bear with me. There we go. Boom. So scouts are perfectly happy to be deployed here. If my opponent has infiltrators, I generally want to deploy these guys first. If my opponent does not have infiltrators, I generally want to deploy them last. There are scenarios where that could change. Another great place where scouts could also be deployed on this particular map is right here. This is also a very interesting place to deploy my scouts. Because once again, I can start them deployed here, so long as they are outside of 9 inches of my opponent's deployment zone. If I go first, I could scout them forward, or I could just advance them forward and block any battle tank or transport that my opponent might be trying to move up this flank. So I could do a 100% move block. And if I go second, I could, of course, just scout behind the wall so that my opponent cannot easily see it. And if they do want to put a battle tank right in here to start shooting my scouts turn 1, I'm probably pretty happy because that means my Vindicator gets to come out and kill their battle tanks first. So you set little deployment traps for your opponent, right? Then we have, what are these? Just intercessors. Intercessors love deploying on your home field and just making it sticky and then doing whatever they do. So we can just start them basically right there. A unit of JPI, a very fast unit that can get to scoring very quickly. They can probably deploy either behind this wall or over here with Marnius, where they could also just be useful for going and doing actions and other things. You could also, of course, always start them in Deep Strike if you were so inclined. I have Reavers. I actually like Reavers in Deep Strike a lot, even though they do have that scout move. One cool thing about their scout move, though, is that you can deploy them on the line, so that if your opponent wants to try to deploy to shoot them, you just scout forward and then your opponent can't shoot you, right? Which is also a very cool option. So they can start Deep Strike or scouts or on the table to take advantage of their cool scout moves. With their scout move, they can pretty much effectively go 12 inches turn 1 without advancing. And if they do advance, they can go all the way up to 18 inches turn 1, which is pretty darn sick. So just be aware of these scouts. One thing I do really like, especially if I'm playing Space Marines, is I like to start Reavers or, say, Incursors inside a transport like an Impulsor. Because that gives the Impulsor a 6-inch scout move, which would allow you to actually deploy an Impulsor right here, where you would normally be afraid of an enemy tank shooting you, but not anymore, because then you could just scout forward once the game starts in order to not be shot. So there's lots of really cool tricks that you can do with those. Just for the purpose of this video, I'm going to start them in Deep Strike to give me a little bit of flexibility. And then lastly, these Inceptors would also deploy. So let's take a quick look at our deployment and see what we have available to us. We're just going to put these guys roughly right there. So if I go first, I'm going to be very, very happy because Marnius is going to go right into the crux of this. Gulliman is going to touch the objective. He'll be within 3 of anyone who's behind this wall. And that is going to give me loan up on Guilliman, meaning Guilliman can't really be interact with very easily from right here. If I am very afraid of my opponent moving a battle tank here to get within 12 inches of a Guilliman, well, maybe I just scoot him back ever so slightly and make it even harder. And if I'm really, really afraid, I can even tuck him right here, and I can have my lieutenant go with combi weapon deployed next to him so that he's still loan up, even though he's all the way over here. Right. So those are options I have for that. Then, on this flank, I'm positioned to go move block or just move back. I can get cleanse, I can get extend, I can get secure no man's land, I can get area denial, I can get engage on all fronts. So if I go first with these scouts, and if I really want engage on all fronts for 4, where I can, put them up here. Typically, that's not necessarily the best option, but hey, if I want to do it, I can do it. Over here, I can also get engage, obviously. So I've got engage, I've got establish locus, I've got extend battle lines, I've got sabotage, I've got recover assets, I've got area denial, I've got every single possible secondary that I can control already scored just based on my deployment, and I more or less risked absolutely nothing. These scouts aren't at risk, right? Because if I go second, they'll go right into this pocket. These scouts really are not at any realistic risk, because if I go second, then they're just going to scout right here behind this wall. Now, I do recognize that my opponent will be able to shoot me, but a little tip for you guys. Sometimes it's okay for you to allow your opponent to shoot you. Because if my opponent wants to put something valuable like a battle tank here to shoot my scouts, that's cool, because that means my Vindicator gets to kill their battle tank before their battle tank gets to shoot my Vindicator. So, sometimes I will give my opponent actual line of sight just so that they can kill. So that is going to be GW1. I'm just going to go ahead and remove here. Let me check the time of this video real fast, because if that was long enough, I might have to do these in videos of like, I don't know. Yeah, that was already almost 20 minutes. So I think I'm just going to start with just GW1 for this video. Hopefully that was really valuable for you guys. You were set up perfectly to go first or second, regardless of what happens. So basically, just what you want to do, measure your lines, make sure you can't get shot, unless it's something, a calculated risk, like I showed you with the scouts over here, and you'll be totally okay. This was Games Workshop 1. I did it on Hammer and Anvil. Just be real fast. We could also check it out on, say, Tipping Point, which is the other place. And what you'll notice is your deployment is almost identical. There's really no difference. You still can't deploy here because you can't put a tank here, because they're just going to get shot if you go second. So basically everything else is essentially exactly the same. You're going to deploy here instead of roughly here. You're going to have your battle tank, your Vindicator, or your Reaper, or your Lancer, or whatever right here. You're still going to have your a unit here to get into the V. There's really, really no differences. The only difference is that your objective isn't here anymore, so that you don't have a really, really great way of holding this objective if you're deploying on this side. And it's a very easy for you to hold this objective if you're deploying on the blue side. So this is still a pocket that you can actually control. And actually, loan ops are still really, really good for this. Where did I put my combi lieutenant? Here it is. This is still a very, very good place to stage, because right here, the only line of sight that really going to be able to draw on him is from this angle, and you're going to be outside of 12, which means you're not going to be able to shoot Robote, which means if he ever really wants to touch this objective, you can go for him. So, Tipping Point and Hammer and Anvil, your deployment's going to be very, very similar with very, very slight alterations. Hopefully this was really valuable for you. If you deploy like this, you're going to be totally fine going first, totally going second. This was GW1 deployment. I'm going to do GW2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8. And we're going to make it work whether you're a shooting army or a melee army. If you like this video, let me know in the comments down below. If you hate this video, let me know in the comments down below. And until next time, all of you beautiful, beautiful people, crump on. Bye-bye.